Who are you to dare step in here? Get out of my store right now, or I will call security. A 42-year-old black woman in an old blazer and simple flats stood frozen in front of the manager's sharp gaze, Rebecca Wilson. No one in the store knew that this woman was Jessica Carter, the legendary founder and CEO of the $100 million Diamond Luxe chain. But Rebecca did not see a founder. She only saw someone who doesn't fit in this upscale space. She dialed a familiar number and said just one line, "I need an emergency meeting with the entire board immediately." What do you think will happen next? Comment where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this. That morning in Beverly Hills was nothing special. The sky was clear. Soft sunlight filtered through the palm fronds, and Bentleys quietly parked along Rodeo Drive. Amidst that glamorous backdrop, a 2004 Toyota Corolla quietly stopped in front of the dazzling jewelry store named Diamond Luxe. Stepping out of the car was a slender black woman, her hair neatly tied up, no jewelry, no makeup. She wore a simple gray blazer, worn-out flats, and on her left wrist was an old silver bracelet, tarnished by time. But that bracelet was the only thing left from her late grandmother, the sole symbol of memory, faith, and resilience. She is Jessica Carter, 42 years old. But no one in Beverly Hills recognizes that name. They only see a normal person in a world of luxury. Not a single gaze lingers, not a word of welcome, only cold, indifferent looks, judging her without a word. Jessica doesn't find it strange. She has grown accustomed to that dismissive silence since her days as a waitress at a cheap diner in Atlanta, where people often referred to her as that dark-skinned server. But today, she's not here to relive old pain. She comes with a clear purpose to check on the very brainchild she has built, Diamond Luxe, unannounced. No notice to her assistant, no signs left behind. This is how she usually assesses her internal culture, not relying on reports, not on statistics, but on the looks, the greetings, and the genuine attitudes of employees when facing someone they deem unworthy. The automatic doors open. The interior feels like another world, bright white marble floors, crystal chandeliers casting golden light, and purple velvet boxes filled with diamonds displayed in sparkling glass cases. Jessica steps in, graceful and confident. But the first gaze she receives is a sharp look from a blonde woman in a designer suit. It is Rebecca Wilson, the branch manager of Beverly Hills. Rebecca doesn't smile. She doesn't nod. She coldly observed from head to toe, her gaze filled with clear suspicion and prejudice. Jessica approached the main display counter, where the famous Aurora collection shone under the special lights. Still, there was no greeting. "Excuse me, I would like to see the Aurora collection." Jessica spoke up, gently but clearly. Rebecca raised an eyebrow slightly, as if offended by that request. She replied with a haughty tone, "Aurora is a collection for VIP customers, with each piece priced from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. We only display it by appointment or with a letter of introduction." Jessica smiled. "I understand the value of Aurora. I truly want to admire it." Rebecca said nothing more, just turned away, deliberately directing Jessica toward the mid-range jewelry counter. The surrounding eyes began to take notice. Some young employees stole glances, especially Ashley, the young Asian staff member at the cash register. Ashley quietly tightened her notebook in her hand, her eyes filled with indignation. Kevin, the assistant manager, looked over at Rebecca, then back at Jessica, his face gradually tense. None of them dared to speak up. At Diamond Luxe, Rebecca's power was absolute. A dissatisfied glance from her could change the work schedule, make month-end bonuses disappear, or even lead to job loss. But Jessica remained calm. She did not back down, nor did she get angry. She stood there, silent like a rock in a rushing river, observing, feeling, and waiting. Outside, passers-by continued to stroll, unaware that inside this store, a seismic disturbance was quietly rising. This is a battle without weapons, but it could change the face of a brand, a business philosophy, and society's view on true respect. The silence in the magnificent space of Diamond Luxe was shattered by a chilling remark. "If you don't have an appointment, I'm afraid we can't serve you," Rebecca Wilson said, while her eyes scrutinized Jessica from head to toe, as if inspecting a faulty item mistakenly placed on display. The air around suddenly grew thick. A few customers in the store began to glance back. A well-dressed white couple exchanged puzzled looks, while an elderly woman adorned with jewelry squinted as if waiting for an interesting performance. Jessica remained still, her hand gently gripping the silver bracelet on her wrist. She understood this coldness well. It wasn't due to company policy. It was the gaze of prejudice, from someone accustomed to categorizing others solely by their clothing and skin color. "Could you show me the Aurora necklace?" Jessica asked again. This time, her eyes locked onto Rebecca's without blinking. Rebecca smirked sarcastically. "That collection isn't just for looking at for fun. If you really want to buy, I need to see a credit card or a confirmation from the bank." Some people were secretly recording with their phones. A few staff members like Ashley and Kevin began to frown. They knew the rules well. Diamond Luxe never asks for financial documents just to view products. This isn't a procedure, but a bias disguised as professionalism. Jessica wouldn't back down, she replied, her voice calm yet resonant. "Excuse me, is this requirement for all customers, or just for me?" "This is Rodeo Drive, not some country mall." The entire store froze. Kevin was speechless, while Ashley stood there with her mouth agape. Marcus, the security staff standing near the door, began to walk over. Not because Jessica was causing trouble, but because he sensed something was off. Rebecca continued, this time louder so everyone around could hear, "If you don't leave, I will have to call security to take you out." "Fine. But before you call anyone, I will call first." She pulled out her phone, the light from the screen causing Rebecca to pause momentarily. No one, including Rebecca, suspected that the woman standing in front of them in casual clothes with an old bracelet could shake the entire Diamond Luxe system with just a phone call. But Rebecca wouldn't back down. She had no idea who Jessica was. And the thought, "I have the right to be here," still governs all of her actions. "Marcus," Rebecca called out loudly. "Come here and take her outside. She's not a customer. Most likely a troublemaker, or worse, a thief." The whole space seemed frozen. Marcus stopped in his tracks. He didn't respond right away. His gaze flicked over to Jessica, a woman he felt he recognized but couldn't quite place, then looked back at Rebecca with hesitation. "She hasn't done anything wrong," Marcus said, his tone low and calm. "She's just asking to see a product." Rebecca spun around sharply, her voice tight. "If you don't follow orders, I'll report to the board that you are obstructing business. You'll be fired immediately." Kevin couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, his voice still shaking. "Rebecca, company policy doesn't allow us to refuse customers based solely on appearance." "You too, Kevin. Then I can find another assistant first thing tomorrow." Rebecca turned sharply, throwing a cutting glare his way. In the stifling atmosphere, Jessica still said nothing. She just gently looked around. All eyes were now on her, the woman who had been openly insulted in front of the entire store. But at that moment, every expression on Jessica's face began to change. No longer just a simple calmness, but a kind of hidden strength that is beginning to rise. She is no longer the waitress from years ago who would get scolded by customers. She is the founder of the Diamond Luxe jewelry empire, and no one in this store knows that in just a few minutes, all power will shift. Ashley Tran stood behind the cash register, her hand still gripping the small blue notebook tightly. The young girl had only been working at Diamond Luxe for less than 8 months, but she could clearly feel the atmosphere in the store, and more than anyone else. She understood that this moment could be a turning point, not just for the black woman being insulted, but for the entire values that Diamond Luxe once claimed to represent. She glanced over at Kevin, the assistant manager, whom she quietly respected for always trying to maintain fairness despite pressure from Rebecca. Kevin stood still, lips pursed, his face tense as he struggled internally between his conscience and his career. Ashley opened her phone, her hand trembling slightly. She knew the rules were very strict about filming during work hours, but this time she no longer hesitated. She switched her phone to video mode, the sound muted, the camera facing Rebecca and Jessica. A small, quiet act, but filled with the courage of a young person willing to stand for justice. With each passing second, Rebecca continued to insult Jessica, her voice growing louder and more domineering. She repeated that Jessica looked like a troublemaker, that people like her shouldn't have access to millions of dollars. Jessica remained silent. But her gaze, deep, sharp, and calm, seemed to convey 1,000 words. Still holding the phone, she opened her contacts, scrolled through a few names, and then pressed call. Ashley couldn't hear the content clearly, but Rebecca's expression gradually changed, from confident to slightly hesitative. She began glancing around, sensing that something was off, yet still trying to maintain an air of authority. Just then, Marcus, the security staff, approached the cash register, standing next to Ashley. He looked at her phone screen, clearly seeing the image being recorded. Without a word of objection, just a slight nod, a silent agreement. Ashley turned to him, her eyes wide open. "Do you know who she is?" she whispered. Marcus replied softly, just enough for her to hear. "Not sure, but something feels very familiar." Across the way, Kevin silently pulled his phone out of his pocket, sending a quick message to his superior at headquarters. "Serious situation at Beverly Hills. Suggest internal surveillance, check the cameras and personnel." Jessica had just ended her call. She didn't say another word to Rebecca, just stood there, her gaze piercing deeply into the psychology of the person opposite her. And then, in an almost instinctive action, she turned to Ashley and gave a slight nod. Ashley was confused. She didn't know if she had been caught recording, but Jessica's look was not one of reproach. It was a recognition. "She knows I'm filming," Ashley thought. And she agreed. Suddenly, an unusual silence enveloped the space. Rebecca, who had just ordered to kick out the customers, now stood motionless as if sensing something bigger was coming. A staff member stepped out from behind with a worried look, quietly asking, "Ms. Rebecca, do you need me to call the main office?" Rebecca glared. "No need. Everything is under control." But the truth is, everything was spiraling out of control, and she knew it. Ashley caught sight of a new pair of customers who had just walked in. 2 middle-aged women, clearly long-time clients, were standing at the door, observing. They looked at Jessica, then at Rebecca, their faces showing skepticism. Soon after, Kevin received a response message from headquarters. "Verify immediately, is that woman Jessica Carter? The CEO is in Beverly Hills." His heart raced. He looked up at Jessica again, and now he was sure. She is the founder of Diamond Luxe. And Rebecca Wilson, the one who just called her a suspect, was digging her own grave. Ashley continued to film. Every frame, every word was being captured, not for the scandal, but for justice. She didn't need to shout slogans. Her actions, silent and steady, were the clearest declaration of who truly deserved to represent Diamond Luxe. Rebecca's voice no longer resonated with the same confidence as before. She began to speak more softly, hesitating, as if sensing the invisible pressure from all the gazes around her. But the damage had started to spread, not from anyone, not through words, but from the increasingly heavy atmosphere in the store. The middle-aged couple who had just entered, Mrs. Mason and Mr. Ellis, regular customers of Diamond Luxe, stood quietly near the Aurora counter. They had witnessed the entire exchange from a distance and were beginning to recognize the oddity in Rebecca's behavior. Mrs. Mason, a refined woman who was always warmly served by Rebecca, furrowed her brow for the first time. "What's going on here?" she quietly asked her husband. Mr. Ellis, an elderly lawyer who had faced many subtle biases in the business world, also felt uneasy. "I don't know, but I think that woman is being treated unfairly." Very unfair. On the other side of the store, a young man admiring a bracelet also began recording with his phone. He didn't speak, just silently raised his camera high to capture the angle between Rebecca and Jessica. He wasn't a regular, but what was happening was too clear to stay silent. At this moment, Jessica stood still, but that stillness had become a strange attraction. You don't need to shout or wave a banner. It's the calmness that awakens the conscience of those around you. Ashley is still recording the video, but starts to glance at other customers. She notices a sympathetic look from a woman of color holding her child, and sees the confusion clearly in the eyes of a delivery guy waiting at the corner of the counter. Each person has their own attitude and starting point, but now they all look towards Jessica. A soft cough comes from Mr. Ellis, then a very quiet remark that makes Rebecca jump. "We are VIP customers here, but I don't think anyone should be treated like this, even if they don't dress like me." Rebecca turns around. Her face begins to change from pale to bright red. "Please don't misunderstand." She tries to keep her voice calm. "I'm just following the store's safety protocol. What kind of protocol requires customers to prove their finances just to look at the merchandise?" Mrs. Mason interrupts, her voice full of indignation. "We've been coming here for years, and we've never been asked anything like that." Another voice chimes in from behind. She clearly stated she wants to buy, not just browse. And even if she just wants to browse, so what? Since when does Diamond Luxe refuse those who want to look at diamonds? That statement comes from an older white woman. She used to be a history teacher, and her long-standing habit is to stroll along Rodeo Drive on weekends. Today, she stepped in because of the sparkling light of the necklace in the Aurora collection. She didn't plan to buy anything, but now she feels she has to speak up. One person, then two people. Then three people, like small embers smoldering from the beginning. Now it has flared up into a fire of consensus. Rebecca stepped back, starting to realize that she had misjudged the situation. The wrong person. The wrong circumstances. She no longer had control over this room. Kevin, still standing by the Aurora counter, looked up. He didn't say anything, but moved closer to Jessica and gently placed a velvet cloth over the glass, a symbolic gesture of being ready to display, something Rebecca had tried to prevent from the start. Jessica glanced over, her eyes filled with gratitude, but not weakness. Rebecca immediately stepped forward, intending to push the cloth away, but Kevin raised his hand to stop her. "Sister Rebecca, if you do this, I will have to report it to the board, and I know exactly who I need to contact." For the first time, Rebecca's hands trembled. You plan to betray me?" Kevin didn't answer. Instead, He looked at Jessica, and for the first time, he bowed his head solemnly. "I'm sorry for what she has done. You have the right to be served like anyone else." The atmosphere in the store erupted with a small wave nods, sympathetic looks, and a few murmurs of agreement. No one raised their voice. No one shouted. But it is that consistent silence that makes Rebecca feel completely isolated. Jessica gently spoke up. "I don't need pity. I just need fairness. And today, I will personally clean up the distorted culture in this place." A middle-aged man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, tall, wearing a metal name tag that read, Harold Levin, the West Area Supervisor of Diamond Luxe. He doesn't frequently visit every store, but internal messages had prompted him to change his schedule this morning. Rebecca immediately rushed toward Mr. Levin like a drowning person clinging to a post. "Mr. Harold, it's great to see you. There's a strange woman causing trouble. She doesn't have an appointment and insists on seeing the Aurora collection without providing any financial documents." He only turned to look at Jessica, his gaze seemingly trying to confirm his suspicions. His brows furrowed, then suddenly relaxed when his eyes caught the worn silver bracelet on Jessica's left wrist. It couldn't be mistaken. He took a step back, more like stepping back emotionally, then looked at Rebecca with an unreadable expression. "Rebecca, let me ask clearly. Did you just ask this woman to leave the store?" he inquired, his voice deep and restrained. Rebecca didn't notice the shift in the atmosphere, still nodding vigorously. "Yes." She couldn't prove her financial capability and kept interrupting the service for VIP guests. "I think we need to resolve this decisively to maintain our brand image." That statement, in a normal situation, might be acceptable. But today, it sounded like a self-incriminating indictment. At this moment, Jessica stood still, her eyes observing Harold. She didn't need to say anything more. Everything was unfolding just as she desired. No need to speak. No need to apply pressure. Just letting the system reveal its cracks from within. Harold swallowed hard, clearly flustered. He had read Jessica Carter's file hundreds of times, but he never imagined he would face her in such a precarious situation. He tried to remain calm and turned to ask one last question. "Are you sure you have never met this person before?" "Rebecca, no. I've never seen her, and I believe I have the right to refuse people who don't align with the brand's vision." Silence. The entire space suddenly felt vacuum-sealed. Kevin, Ashley, Marcus, all held their breath. Jessica slowly took a step forward, stopping just an arm's length away from Harold. She pulled out a matte black metal card from her jacket pocket, the kind only founders would possess. It clearly bore the inscription Jessica Carter, founder and CEO, Diamond Luxe International. Rebecca's mouth dropped open. In an instant, her whole body seemed to fall into a state of paralysis. Her hand relaxed slightly, and the key to the Aurora display case fell to the marble floor, echoing sharply. Harold took a deep breath. "Rebecca, you just fired the CEO of the company you're working for." "No, that can't be true." Rebecca stepped back, her hands trembling. I didn't know." Kevin looked straight at Rebecca, for the first time no longer avoiding her gaze. "You know the company policy don't discriminate against customers for any reason, but this morning, you did the complete opposite." Harold's tone was no longer gentle. "I want you to temporarily step away from the sales area, right now." Rebecca turned pale. "Wait, Harold, let me explain." But her voice was drowned out by a wave of commotion. Customers began pulling out their phones to record. A few people were live streaming the event. The first comments appeared on the screen. The CEO denied service by her own store. "Unbelievable. This is the peak of ignorance due to prejudice. I've been treated like this before. but few can stand up like she did. Rebecca suddenly burst into tears, not out of real regret, but out of an increasing fear of losing everything. Jessica did not respond. She turned to Harold. "I suggest we hold an urgent internal meeting at headquarters this afternoon. And give me full authority to handle this case publicly." Harold nodded without hesitation. "Clearly." "We will support you to the fullest." Jessica turned around, not bothering to look at Rebecca again. Not necessary. The one who had built a throne of prejudice for themselves was now being swept away by the very fairness that Jessica had cultivated like a storm. As Rebecca staggered backward, tears soaking the perfect makeup on her face, Jessica Carter didn't need to raise her voice, nor did she need to emphasize each word like an enraged director. Instead, she turned back, pulled out her phone, and dialed a familiar number. A deep male voice answered on the other end. "Andrew, I need the complete internal records of the Beverly Hills branch, especially the HR complaints from the last 18 months. Send it to my personal email within 10 minutes. Without any extra words." She hung up. Her hand still held the tarnished silver bracelet, like an anchor keeping her mind from being swept away in the rising emotional storm. For some time now, she had learned to turn anger into action, not impulsively, not confronting with harsh words, but systematically, with principles, and with the quiet power she held. Harold Levin stood beside her, now having stepped back, his gaze still heavy with regret for not realizing it sooner. Jessica didn't blame him, but she didn't offer any comfort either. For her, this was no longer just a matter of a negligent manager. It was a warning bell about a system gradually drifting away from the path she had worked so hard to build. At this moment, Rebecca had been gently invited out of the display area by Marcus. She did not resist, only nodded weakly, as if what was left of her pride had been crushed under the weight of reality. The red carpet laid out on the floor of the upscale store was no longer a symbol welcoming VIP guests. It was now the final path leading someone away from the land of distorted privilege. Jessica slowly walked toward the central counter, where the Aurora collection still sparkled in the glass case. Kevin quickly unlocked it, carefully taking out the most expensive necklace, the piece of jewelry once worn by starlets on the canned red carpet. "Would you like to examine every detail?" "Ms. Carter," Kevin asked, his tone respectful. Jessica smiled gently, not responding directly, only accepting the necklace. Her fingers brushed over each intricate cut, her gaze quietly following each diamond. But in her eyes, it wasn't the allure of material beauty. It was an evaluation of whether this place still held the soul she had infused into it. Ashley stood behind, still hesitant to look away. Jessica looked up, staring directly at the young girl, and nodded. "Thank you for your bravery." Just 5 words, but Ashley felt a tremor inside her. She pressed her lips tightly to keep from crying, but her eyes were already red. Jessica turned to Kevin. "I will ask you to temporarily take on the branch manager role while we wait for the official decision. In the meantime, I want a detailed report on all complaints that customers and employees have submitted over the past 2 years." Kevin nodded firmly. "I'll get right on it." Jessica didn't say anything more, just pulled out a thick envelope from her bag containing printed copies of Diamond Luxe's core policies on fair treatment and anti-discrimination. She handed it to Harold. "This is a document that every branch must post in the most visible place. I signed it 3 years ago. But I'm afraid this branch has never complied." Harold took it. Speechless, he bowed his head. Jessica looked around, seeing all the employees standing silently, their eyes filled with anticipation, worry, but also a glimmer of hope. "Don't be afraid," she said clearly. "I'm not here to fire everyone. I'm here to rebuild, and only those who deny human worth will have no place here." The atmosphere felt like it was lifting. A few employees sighed with relief. Marcus, the security guard, who always kept a watchful eye, broke into a small smile. The first one all morning during this tense time. At that moment, the doorbell rang. A group of customers walked in, unfamiliar faces, but their eyes showed they had caught wind of something happening. They paused, hesitating. Jessica looked at them, then turned to Ashley. Welcomed them as if it's their first time at the fairest place in the world. Ashley nodded, tears still sparkling. She stepped forward, smiling. Hello, dear guests. Today we have something special to share. As Ashley approached to greet the new group of guests, the store seemed to return to its normal rhythm. But Jessica knew well the surface might settle, but the cracks deep within the foundation needed to be confronted. And nothing was clearer than the truth that was surfacing. Diamond Luxe, Rodeo Drive branch, had existed in a moral blind spot for many years. While Kevin was processing the duty log, a new series of messages arrived from headquarters, a summary of 8 official complaints from customers and employees over the past 18 months, all related to Rebecca Wilson's discriminatory behavior. Not a single record was handled properly. 4 complaints from customers of color, 3 from internal staff, and 1 from none other than Marcus, who had just refused to carry out an unethical order. Jessica read each line, her face impassive, but her grip tightening around the silver bracelet. In those complaints, there was one common thread: being looked down upon for their appearance, being implied to not have enough money, being led to the low price section without request, and worse yet, were the clear descriptions of how Rebecca frequently used phrases like, a more realistic assessment. Those words may seem polite, but each syllable carries a clear message: you're not up to par here. She gestured for him to come closer. Marcus, I see you've sent internal reports before. Yes, Ms. Carter. Sent 3 times, through the internal system. The first time was when a Latinx guest was taken straight to the clearance counter. The second time was when a new employee was fired for being too friendly with a guest in sportswear. The last time was when I refused to remove an elderly black woman because she had been standing too long near the display case, not out of surprise, but out of heartbreak. She opened her eyes and gently said, I'm sorry we didn't hear you sooner. I understand. The intermediary mechanism was blocked. My report was labeled insufficient basis and sent back. A discovery that made him momentarily pause. He printed out 2 invoices, both for transactions of white customers with items from the Aurora collection, and placed them on the table next to a blank invoice that Rebecca had refused to process this morning when Jessica requested it. No explanation needed. 3 pieces of paper, 3 stories, and 1 truth. White customers received attentive service, without financial checks. Jessica, the founding CEO, just because she is a black woman dressed simply, was dismissed outright, even suspected of having theft intentions. Just then, Ashley approached, holding a small object in her hand. Miss Carter, I think you should take a look at this. It was a clip from the internal camera, specifically from last Tuesday. Rebecca was standing at the counter, talking to a new employee. If you see anyone in a hoodie, carrying a tote bag, or speaking too much Spanish, show them the promotions area first. Don't let them wander around the main collection. Jessica closed her eyes once more. Not in anger, but in silence. That brief video, not even 15 seconds long, had exposed the entire essence. Every gaze in the store was now beginning to change completely. Regular customers like Mrs. Mason and Mr. Ellis looked at Jessica with admiration, but their gaze towards this place no longer held respect, but suspicion? How many times had they unknowingly benefited at the expense of others? Marcus approached, handing Jessica a list of employees who had been unjustly reprimanded by Rebecca over the past 2 years, including Ashley, and a Middle Eastern employee who had been fired for lacking the appropriate charisma for a luxury environment. Jessica didn't need to look up any more information. The picture was complete, and worse, this was not a temporary distortion. This is an underground culture, created by the very top manager of this branch, a microsystem of exclusion, of a biased perspective, and of power manipulation to protect a distorted norm. She walked up to the center counter. Each step echoed in the space, becoming heavy. She looked around and spoke, not loudly, but clearly. We will not brush this off and say it's an isolated incident. We will not label it as a misunderstanding. This is discrimination. This is stigma, and I will not let this exist for another day. After Jessica Carter's declaration, the entire store fell into a hushed silence. The whispers, the light footsteps on the marble floor, even the soft classical music from the speakers, all seemed to be stopped by the weight of the truth that had just been revealed. But then, like a stretched string finally snapping, the wave of reaction began to rise. The first to speak was Mrs. Mason. She slowly approached Jessica, her eyes filled with remorse. "Ms. Carter," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I've been to this store dozens of times, always welcomed like a VIP, but I never thought that the privileges I received stood above the silent pain of others. Today, I am sorry, not just for what you had to endure, but because I have been silent for too long. She is the reason I once believed this place stood for kindness. It's Mr. Ellis." He looked at Jessica with a determined gaze. "You're not just the CEO, you are the living symbol of principles. And I choose to stand by you." Behind him were a series of small but significant actions. A young man of color raised his phone high, saying loudly, "I was turned away here 5 months ago just for wearing a hoodie. Today, seeing you stand here is a dream come true." A young Muslim woman removed her headscarf, wiping away tears. "I was asked to leave the bridal dressing room by Rebecca because I didn't fit the brand image. Today, I've been vindicated." An Asian man simply nodded at Jessica and gave a thumbs up. No words needed. His eyes spoke enough. The atmosphere began to shift. Those who were once considered unqualified now formed an invisible but strong force, together a humane wall standing against any form of discrimination. Kevin was no longer just an assistant. In the eyes of his colleagues and clients, he was the first to dare to act in silence. He stepped forward, looking around at the remaining staff, his voice deep but sure. "If any of us have ever been treated unfairly because of skin color, background, or simply for not fitting the norm today, please don't remain silent any longer. Ms. Carter has taken the first step. Now it's our turn." A curly-haired female employee stood silently behind the counter, bursting into tears. "I was once warned just for having neon pink nails while serving white customers. I used to think it was my fault, but it wasn't. It turns out it was the system that kept us silent." Ashley could no longer stay calm. She stepped forward, stood beside Jessica, and turned to everyone. "We used to fear Rebecca because of the power she held. But now, real power is standing right here, next to us." Jessica quietly looked at each person who spoke, not interrupting, not interjecting. She let the wave spread, naming each wound and restoring the existence of each witness. Marcus, the silent doorman for many years, finally spoke for the first time in front of all the guests. "I used to be a soldier, but today is the first time I've seen a great counterattack without weapons, without slogans, just the truth." The space gradually transformed into a public discussion area, where guests and staff shared experiences of being hurt, judged, and feeling unworthy. And within those shared words, Diamond Luxe finally became what Jessica had always dreamed of, a place where everyone, no matter who they are, is heard and valued. An elderly man with brown skin and silver hair nodded. "You haven't just saved a store. You are correcting a misconception that many of us have accepted as normal." It was then that Jessica spoke up, gently but firmly. "We cannot erase the past, but we can rewrite from this chapter onward. If anyone here is ready to join me on the journey to rebuild Diamond Luxe, please step this way with me." No one hesitated. One by one, they stepped forward, standing next to Jessica, like a silent commitment. Not just to her, but to the values she represents: fairness, bravery, and dignity. Once again, the Diamond Luxe store, Rodeo Drive branch, fell into a hushed state. But this time, it wasn't the heavy tension of underlying prejudice. It was a sacred moment of silence before a truth about to be declared. Jessica Carter stood in the center of the showroom, where crystal lights sparkled on million-dollar jewelry. But all eyes were focused on the woman in a gray blazer, wearing flat shoes and an old silver bracelet. No one looked at her as a poorly dressed stranger anymore, but as a symbol of resilience, of awakening, and of genuine power without ostentation. Kevin gently placed the handheld microphone from the counter into her hand. No one spoke. Everyone was waiting for something that their inner selves had long acknowledged, but now needed to be formally established. Jessica glanced around, the faces of each employee, each customer, every person who had once been silent but now stood beside her, like a wall of support. She took a deep breath. "My name is Jessica Carter," she said, her voice deep, clear, and confident. "I am the founder, CEO, and majority owner of the Diamond Luxe system across the United States." A strong breath was heard. A few customers covered their mouths. Some took a step back in shock, but most of them, especially those who stood by her, only held each other's hands tighter, as if they knew, they believed, and now they just awaited confirmation. Jessica continued, her voice not loud, but carrying the weight like a bell ringing in the heart of the city. "I started Diamond Luxe from scratch, from a cardboard desk, from unpaid tuition loans, from days working as a waitress for 14 hours a day and still being considered invisible. I built this place with one goal in mind: everyone, regardless of appearance, background, or skin color, has the right to walk in here and be treated like valuable human beings." She paused. The space remained absolutely silent. Jessica raised her left wrist, the tarnished silver bracelet shining under the lights. "This bracelet belonged to my grandmother. The only person who ever believed I could do something special in life. I keep it to remind myself that everything glamorous today means nothing if I forget that I was once rejected for not looking rich enough." Her eyes were fixed directly on the live stream camera of a guest filming. "Today, I am not just here as the CEO. I am here as someone who has been excluded from the very world I created just for wearing the wrong clothes, driving the wrong car, and speaking with the wrong accent. And that must never be allowed to happen again." The first applause rang out from Ashley, then Kevin, and then the entire staff, each customer, each person, each clap, like thunder echoing in the showroom that once felt stifled by invisible favoritism. Jessica raised her hand to signal everyone to stop. She still had something to say. "We often confuse power with status, with money, with clothing, but true power is the ability to turn a terrible place into a kind one. It's being brave enough to correct mistakes, even your own." She glanced towards the door, where Rebecca Wilson had quietly returned, standing behind the glass. Her face was pale, devoid of any pride. But Jessica didn't call her name. She didn't look for long. No need for revenge. The truth was enough. She turned back to those who had stood up from silence. Today, I reveal my identity not to show who is in power, but so that all of us, from customers to employees, know that if the leader is dismissed for not looking worthy, then this system needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. And I am the one who will do that. No more applause, but rather the scattered calls. Jessica, the real CEO. Diamond Lux deserves her name. Jessica nodded lightly, thanking with her eyes. Outside the glass door, hundreds began to gather those who heard the news from the live stream, passers-by stopping to watch, those who had once been silent in the face of prejudice, now with one heartbeat. And that's when Diamond Lux became more than just a brand. It became a symbol of trust, justice, and the ability to restore ethics right in the most decayed places. Right after Jessica revealed her identity in the Rodeo Drive showroom, an urgent call from Diamond Lux's headquarters in New York was immediately connected. The person on the line was the senior executive director of the corporation, Mr. Daniel Park, a Korean man known for his strictness but who always respects the core principles of the brand fairness, transparency, and humanity. Kevin was the one who directly received the call. Just a few minutes later, Mr. Park requested to speak directly with Jessica via an internal video meeting. A computer screen from the back operations room was pulled out right in the center of the store. The technician connected the system. Customers were invited to sit around the central area, but no one left. No one wanted to miss a moment of this unprecedented public meeting in Diamond Lux's history. The image of Daniel Park appeared. Behind him was the official logo of the corporation, the golden sign of the headquarters, and the entire board of directors sitting silently on the video conference screens. He nodded slightly, his expression calm yet tense. "Jessica," he said in a deep voice, each word clear. "We have watched the entire live stream. The media is exploding. The incident at Rodeo Drive is becoming a national focus. But first, I want to personally apologize on behalf of the entire council to you." Jessica stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I don't need an apology for myself. I need a concrete action for all the customers who have been denied, and for all the employees who have been treated unfairly by the very system we created." Daniel fell silent for a few seconds, then nodded more deeply. "You are right, and I, along with the entire council, have agreed in the recent emergency meeting, all personnel management, restructuring, and communication related to the Rodeo Drive branch from this moment on is fully entrusted to you." The entire store fell silent. Then there was a wave of applause, though soft. It was relentless. The atmosphere felt liberated. Jessica did not show any victorious emotions. She asked further, "So do I have the right to publicly disclose the complaints that were hidden internally? Yes? Do I have the right to temporarily suspend or fire anyone who has violated brand culture rules? No need to go through the council." "You are the founder. You have full authority." Jessica nodded. She walked toward the center of the showroom, where Rebecca Wilson stood silently behind a marble pillar, her hands trembling. Marcus had let her back in, with no one to stop her. No one needed to stop her, because confrontation was inevitable. Jessica turned back and said to the entire store, "I need 3 witnesses to confirm that manager Rebecca Wilson's actions have gone against the core values of Diamond Lux." Ashley stepped forward first, holding her phone. "This is the recording from the 8th of last month when Rebecca told me, 'If the customer doesn't look rich enough, don't bring them near the main collection. It only wastes time and tarnishes the brand image.'" Kevin printed out a copy of the complaint record. "I confirmed that I was once prevented from serving a couple of color in the VIP area. When I protested, I was threatened with being moved to a late-night shift without pay. Marcus said briefly. I was once asked to kick out an elderly African woman because she didn't have the right demeanor for a high-end store. I refused and was reprimanded. 3 facts, and dozens of silent nods confirmed it. Jessica looked at Rebecca, but this time, there was no anger, nor a need to intimidate. She simply said one sentence, Rebecca Wilson, with full authority granted by the Diamond Lux Board of Directors. I declare from this moment on, you are officially terminated from all management positions, and your employment contract will end immediately. Rebecca did not collapse. She did not fall, but her gaze was empty. Her hands were limp, and her steps unconsciously retreated towards the glass door. She had nothing left to say. All arguments had become meaningless. Jessica turned to Mr. Daniel Park on the screen. I will proceed with a complete restructuring of the service culture across the system. Starting from this branch, Daniel Park nodded, and I will provide you with an unlimited budget to do that. She didn't need any more confirmation. She had gained the most important thing, trust. No need for a trial. No need for a lawsuit. Justice, in the hands of the founder, was served in the middle of the showroom, in front of all the customers and staff. And that is what makes Diamond Lux different. Rebecca Wilson walked heavily, as if carrying a huge stone on her shoulder. She was not being dragged away, nor escorted, but every glance from the staff, every silent bow from the customers, felt like invisible blades piercing her already towering pride. The one who once sat on the throne managing Diamond Lux Rodeo Drive was now consumed by her own superior dream. Jessica did not follow her. Her gaze was now directed towards those who remained the employees quietly upholding values while their leader increasingly strayed from them. Kevin, she called, her tone calm but firm. Present. Kevin immediately stepped forward, standing straight, not avoiding the CEO's gaze. He had been courageous from the very first moment, but now, that look carried a deep belief that he had made the right choice. You will temporarily take over the position of branch manager. I need someone who not only understands the product, but also the heart of this brand. Kevin paused briefly, his eyes wide. Then he bowed his head deeply, feeling emotional but still maintaining his professionalism. I won't let you down. Jessica turned to Marcus. He stood a few steps away, hands clasped in front of his stomach, standing straight like a soldier. Marcus, she said, her voice warmer, I've heard about your feedback from the lower-level staff. But I've never seen your name in any official complaint records. Marcus chuckled lightly. I thought someone like me shouldn't bother the system with small matters. Now I know. It's the silence that is the most dangerous. Jessica nodded. From today, you will be in charge of training and overseeing the entire Diamond Lux security team nationwide. Your moral example deserves to be shared. Marcus was momentarily stunned, as if he couldn't believe his ears. His whole life, he had protected the intangible security, rules, order, but he never thought there would be a day when the founder would officially place trust in him in front of so many people. Thank you, ma'am, he said, placing his hand on his chest as a wordless vow. Jessica looked over at Ashley, who remained silent near the cash register, where the video capturing Rebecca's discrimination had been stored. That young Asian girl may not hold power, but she was the first to dare to lift the camera not to protest, but because she believed in the truth. Ashley, Jessica said, you're not just capturing an important moment for this store. You were the first one to hit record when everyone else was hesitant. You will be the new assistant manager. You will help Kevin rewrite how we serve. Ashley was at a loss for words. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. She had once thought that a small employee like herself couldn't do anything more than stay silent. But now she understood. A simple button press. A courageous look could change an entire system. The whole store suddenly erupted in a thunderous applause. No one asked for it. No one initiated it, but everyone understood this wasn't a reward. This was a re-establishment of justice. Jessica raised her hand to signal for silence, then looked around at the remaining employees. Those who have been threatened, pushed out for not being up to standard, I invite you to come back to my office in the back. There. I will listen to each of you individually. And if needed, I will personally sign decisions for reinstatement, compensation, and promotion to deserving positions. A line of people quietly separated from the counters. Some had worked here for 6 years. Some had only been here for 3 months. Some had been made to cry by Rebecca after their first shift. But today, they all walked with their heads held high because they knew their voices had been heard. Outside, the crowd is gathering more and more. A few reporters are live streaming. News about the CEO being denied service in her own store has gone viral on social media. But Jessica isn't chasing after the media spotlight. She isn't holding a press conference. She isn't reading a statement. She just acts quietly, but with a weight 1,000 times more powerful than a PR campaign. Finally, Jessica signals the technician to turn off the large projector screen, then turns to Kevin. Tomorrow, we will close this branch for a day to rebuild. Change the internal rules, remove all the old target pressures, and restore what made Diamond Luxe the heart of humanity. Kevin nods. I will prepare everything. She gently removes the silver bracelet from her wrist, placing it on the glass of the Aurora case as a symbol. As a reminder, this is not just a place that sells diamonds, but a place that upholds human dignity. The next morning, the entire Diamond Luxe Rodeo Drive branch is closed for the first time in its 12-year history. The glass door displays a simple notice: temporarily closed to restore brand culture. No flashy PR logos, no grand press releases. But those who witnessed yesterday's event understand inside, a major overhaul is taking place. Inside the store, the lights are no longer blindingly bright to showcase the products. Instead, soft pendant lights were adjusted to shine evenly down on each conference table and work area. There are no guests, only staff members and a simple woman at the head of the room. Jessica Carter. She isn't sitting on a high podium. She sits with everyone else, at the round table, still holding an old silver bracelet. In front of her is a list of 14 employees who had been warned by Rebecca or pushed to night shifts, transferred to different positions, or denied promotions simply because they didn't fit the Diamond Luxe image. Jessica begins the internal meeting with her silence. She listens to each person. A Haitian staff member named Claudine recounts how she had her salary lowered for not having perfect English pronunciation. A young man of Mexican descent named Alejandro was transferred to stockroom duty for 6 months after a VIP guest complained about his street-accented voice. A Chinese-American student named Wei Lin was warned for laughing too much with customers in casual attire. Jessica remains silent. But her eyes say it all pained, yet resolute. After all 14 employees have spoken, she says one sentence: "I'm sorry. And I promise none of you will be forgotten again." A set of documents had been prepared in advance. Each of them will receive a raise, be recorded in the system as outstanding recovery personnel, and be prioritized for advanced training, not to turn them into replicas of some luxury standard, but to make them guides for the new generation on the humanistic culture of Diamond Luxe. Jessica stood up and walked to the center of the room, where Kevin, Ashley, and Marcus were waiting. She looked at Kevin first. "I officially appoint you as the branch manager of Rodeo Drive. You weren't chosen for the position. You were chosen because you made the right choice, even without any power backing you." She turned to Ashley. "Assistant Director. You are the embodiment of a Diamond Luxe that I have always dreamed of. No silence, no hesitation, just action, at the right time. Ashley shed tears. But she wasn't crying out of weakness. She cried because she knew that from now on, people like her no longer had to bow their heads in the shadows. Finally, Jessica placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. You will be promoted to Regional Security Director. Not only because you have maintained integrity in a twisted system, but because I need you to retrain the entire security team on how to protect not just property, but also the dignity of people. Marcus bowed his head, saying nothing, but everyone could see his eyes were red. Jessica raised her hand, signaling for the room to be quiet. Then she said, Diamond Luxe cannot claim to be a luxury brand if it does not start by respecting the servers, the guards, the doormen, the stockkeepers, and those who enter wearing scuffed shoes. The whole room applauded. Not a polite applause, but the applause of hearts that had once been pushed to the margins now being brought back to the center. Right after the recognition event, Jessica proposed an internal program named the Silver Ring, where each month the branch would select an employee who truly reflects the humane spirit of the brand to receive a symbol of honor, a small silver ring engraved with the words, I see you. I hear you. You belong here. It's not an expensive gift. But for those who have been rejected, overlooked, or made to feel invisible, that recognition is worth more than any diamond in a display case. That day, Diamond Luxe did not open its doors to customers, but it reopened the doors of trust, of a completely new chapter where dignity is the most valuable asset, and kindness is the most important business policy. A week later, Diamond Luxe Rodeo Drive officially reopened. But this time, there were no red carpets, no famous guests, or champagne. Instead, the reopening began with a simple act. All employees lined up at the door, wearing the small silver ring engraved with the words, I see you. I hear you. You belong here. Jessica Carter did not stand on a high podium, nor did she give an opening speech. She simply blended in with the line, wearing the ring, smiling, and bowing her head to each guest who walked through the door. The store had changed now. The display cases were lowered to be more accessible for people with disabilities. A new service charter is hung right at the entrance with the first line in bold. No one is judged by their appearance. Inside, a new area called the Heritage Corner has been established. It showcases Jessica's real silver bracelet, the only piece of jewelry she kept from her late grandmother. Below it is a small plaque from someone who was once rejected. To all those who have ever been overlooked, every day, customers come not just to buy jewelry. They come to touch the glass surface where the bracelet lies as a vivid testament to a quiet revolution in the luxury retail industry. The media calls this the greatest moral pivot of a jewelry brand in the 21st century. Major newspapers from New York to Paris and Tokyo are reporting on it, but Jessica does not grant interviews. She declines all invitations to speak at luxury industry conferences. I don't need to stand on stage, she tells Kevin. I just need to be in the right place. The story of the black woman who was kicked out of her own store and then returned to restore justice becomes a topic of discussion everywhere. But more importantly, it inspires hundreds of employees at over 40 other Diamond Luxe branches. Handwritten letters, emails, and thank you videos come in from everywhere, from a sales associate in Chicago to a janitor at the Miami branch. Jessica has spent nearly 3 weeks visiting each branch. No advance notice, no media team. It was just her, the old gray blazer, and the familiar silver bracelet on her wrist. She didn't come to check sales, but to ask each employee one simple question. If someone who doesn't look like a VIP walks in today, how would you treat them? And then, she sat down and listened to their answers. In a corporate meeting, Daniel Park, who used to be her boss, stood up and spoke to the entire board of directors. Jessica is not just the founder, she is the one who saved the soul of the brand. The board unanimously approved the proposal starting next year. The day Jessica was denied service at Rodeo Drive would become Internal Justice Day throughout the Diamond Lux system, a day without sales, dedicated to ethics training, sharing experiences, and remembering all the times people remained silent in the face of injustice. And on that day, all employees, regardless of rank, must wear the silver bracelet, not for show, but to remember that the true essence of luxury lies not in jewels, but in how we treat those around us. Jessica Carter's story goes beyond the world of jewelry. It has become a guiding light for the entire service, retail, and fashion industries. Once seen as a stronghold of subtle discrimination, it has now become a place that openly waves the flag of equality. In an anonymous letter sent to the New York Times editorial office, a customer who witnessed the whole event that day wrote, "I used to think I came to Diamond Lux to buy perfection, but that day, I bought something more valuable: trust." She, the one who was cast out, taught us that true power does not need to be held high. It just needs to stand firm. At the end of the day, as the crowd dispersed, the lights in the shop were dimmed, and the staff took turns saying goodbye as they left. Jessica remained by the display case where the silver bracelet was placed. Kevin approached, softly asking, "Do you still remember the first time you walked into this store?" Jessica nodded. "At that time, I was a 21-year-old girl, having just been rejected at 3 different places for not looking suitable. And I promised myself if one day I could create a place of my own, I wouldn't let anyone else feel the way I felt that day." Then he asked, "And now, do you think you've done it?" Jessica looked at the display case, then up at the inscription on the small silver bracelet worn by everyone today. "You belong here." She smiled, I think. "Now I do. Thank you for following this inspiring story." Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories about justice, dignity, and courage. See you on the next journey.